COVID-related microchip shortages and the lemon law. Who's responsible? So I'm sure if you've been following the news, you've heard about the massive microchip shortage caused by COVID. And I'm sure you've also heard of the limited new car inventory and also the really high prices to get a new car these days because of supply chain issues. What you might have not thought about though is how is this chip shortage affecting new vehicle car repairs when the new car that you bought might turn out to be defective? It could turn out to be a lemon. And unfortunately, the chip shortage is actually causing massive delays in repairs. So imagine the situation that you just bought a brand new car and you're driving it around, something goes wrong with it, it breaks down on you, and you take your vehicle into the repair shop to get fixed under warranty, and it's there 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, then a week, then 2 weeks. And before you know it, you're without your car for a month or more. And what the repair shop is telling you is, gosh, sorry, because of COVID, we don't have the replacement parts for your vehicle, so you just have to wait. So you have to be without your brand new car. So you call the vehicle manufacturer, you ask, hey, can anything be done here? And they basically tell you, no, there's a microchip shortage, so we don't have the parts on hand. You just have to wait. And so then you start thinking to yourself, well, gosh, there must be some kind of lemon law that could help me out here. Either give me my money back or give me a new car because, this isn't fair. I just bought a brand new vehicle and I can't even use it. Well, not so fast, the car company says. It turns out that there's some lemon laws that have exclusions, and COVID should fall under those exclusions. So you might be thinking to yourself now, well, does COVID prevent lemon law help? Really? Well, let's take a look at what the lemon law actually is and whether the car company has a legitimate point or not. So all 50 states in the United States have some type of lemon law. And although there are some differences in the standards between the states, at the heart of all lemon laws is the following. So first, you need to have experienced a substantial problem. Then, if that substantial problem cannot be repaired within a reasonable number of repair attempts or within a reasonable time, the lemon law steps in to basically say, hey, enough is enough. Not just that, there's also a federal lemon law called the Magnus Warranty Act that applies to all warranted consumer products such as cars. And under that law, you can get cash compensation. And also, most lemon laws enable you to recover attorney's fees. And the reason for that is because state legislatures and also Congress wanted consumers to have the help of attorneys to make sure that manufacturing car companies, that the automotive industry was complying with the lemon law and taking responsibility for lemons. And so with that being said, although the lemon law does apply to new vehicles, there's generally a mileage limit and a time of ownership limit. So for example, in some states, the limit could be 1 year, 18,000 miles. In another state, it could be 2 years, 24,000 miles. That's the typical range, although there's some outliers beyond that. And so the issue is that lemon laws, they don't cover every possible scenario that could happen with your vehicle. So what are some lemon law exclusions? For example, once your vehicle has a certain age or number of miles, once you get beyond that point, if you have repairs that happen, those are not covered by the lemon law. If your warranty is expired, after that point, the lemon law typically doesn't apply. If there is an outside cause of the problems with your vehicle, for example, if your vehicle is modified, if it's lifted, or you have a new stereo system installed and that causes problems with the vehicle, that's not covered by the lemon law. What else isn't covered by the lemon law? If you abuse your vehicle, say you off-road it or you get in a car accident, that's not covered by the lemon law. Also, if you fail to maintain your vehicle, that is not covered by the lemon law. And some lemon laws have another exclusion, which is based on if there's some kind of natural disaster or if there is a war or invasion. If any of those things cause repair delays, that could possibly be excluded under the lemon law, depending on the state that you're in. Now, when it comes to natural disasters, that's typically defined within lemon laws themselves as something like a hurricane, a tornado, a fire, or a flood. And in fact, the Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of natural disaster is very similar to that. It's basically a sudden, terrible event in nature, such as a hurricane, a tornado, or a flood that causes severe damage and that can cause severe loss of life. So, is COVID a natural disaster? That's the question. That's what some car companies are arguing, even if the state lemon law does not include a natural disaster exception. So let's take a look at it. Let's look at it fairly. When it comes to COVID, there's definitely been, a massive disruption. There's been numerous deaths and economic disruptions. That's clearly the case. We're not going to dispute that. Here's the issue, though. It doesn't meet the second half of a definition of a natural disaster. And what that is an event in nature, such as a hurricane, a flood, a massive forest fire. So the thing to know about lemon laws are that they are considered what are called consumer protection remedial statutes. What that means is it's meant to remedy a harm that consumers are experiencing with defective products. And courts have interpreted that to mean that because the lemon law is a remedial statute, it should be broadly interpreted in favor of consumers, not in favor of manufacturers. So if you look at the definition of what a natural disaster is, COVID only meets half of that definition. So that ambiguity, that vagueness, must be interpreted in favor of the consumer. Because again, lemon laws are consumer protection remedial statutes. They are to be interpreted in your favor, not in the car company's favor. So because of that, even if COVID fits part of the definition of natural disaster, because it doesn't fit the entire definition of natural disaster, lemon laws must be interpreted in your favor. And COVID cannot be used as an excuse, as a technicality to exclude lemon law coverage and to shield motor vehicle manufacturers from their lemon law responsibilities when they produce a defective product that you can't use. And so as far as the definition, they cannot use COVID as an exclusion. But you know what? That's not the only reason that manufacturers should not be allowed to use COVID as an excuse for not limiting your vehicle when they should. Let's take a look at what caused the chip shortage in the first place. So, what happened was in March of 2020, the automotive industry decided to basically either cancel or delay their microchip orders because of the shutdowns. They were anticipating that car sales were going to plummet. And they incorrectly estimated that the shutdowns would last longer than they actually did. Now, this was a good faith mistake, but it was still the manufacturer's mistake. It was not your mistake as the consumer. And so the problem is once the car companies either canceled or delayed their microchip orders, the microchip companies, they're a business, they had to make money. They didn't just sit on their hands and not sell the microchips to anybody else. So guess what they did? Demand went up dramatically for home electronics such as computers, video game systems, TVs. People were stuck at home, also cell phones. And so what the microchip manufacturers did is instead of selling the microchips to the car companies, they sold the microchips to the consumer electronic industry. So when the lockdowns ended faster than expected and new car orders start to build rapidly, well, the car companies came back to the microchip companies and said, okay, now we need the microchips. But the microchip companies said, hey, sorry, we've sold the microchips. We don't have them. The other problem is that a lot of the microchips that car companies use tend to be cheap, low-level microchips that have a very small profit margin for the microchip companies. So they don't have a really huge incentive to ramp up production just so they can take care of the car companies. Also, the fact that with technology rapidly changing, those microchips in a couple of years could end up not being able to be sold at all. So that's what's left the car companies in a bind. But why would the microchip shortage cause repair delays? Let's take a look at that. The reason is because modern cars, they have lots of modules, diagnostics on vehicles, also automated features, navigation systems, brake systems, engine systems, and most of these systems now require microchips. Not just a few microchips, anywhere from 500 to 1,500 microchips per component. So the problem is if your car breaks down and you've got a component that needs microchips, and again, many of your car's components do require microchips, guess what? The chip shortage is going to affect your ability to get your car fixed because they don't have the microchips to manufacture the component required to repair your vehicle. So look, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is should the automotive industry or should you face the consequences of this chip shortage? Well, we think that the answer is pretty clear here. The automotive industry should accept responsibility. They made the decision to either delay or cancel their chip orders. And they know how cars are made. And so, look, as a matter of fact, just ordering chips as you manufacture vehicles, that's not sufficient. You obviously need to have a stockpile of these microchips because they're so critical for repairs. And so these companies, they made the choice not just to cancel their orders, not just to delay their orders, but to not have a backup supply of microchips. Now, is that your fault or is that their fault? You know the answer to that. And you know what? Not all car companies made this mistake. Toyota, as a matter of fact, apparently had a backup supply and stockpile of microchips and a much larger supply than the other car companies. They learned the lesson from natural disasters that happened in Japan. And so it's not like car companies, there was nothing they can do here. They made a business decision. That decision ended up being wrong. Because of that, consumers of defective lemon vehicles are being left out in the cold, and that's not fair. And you know what else? According to the research that I've done, this chip shortage is not just going to be for another couple of months. Turns out that the chip shortage is predicted to last until at least 2025. So do you think that's fair to you or to any other consumer that you buy a brand new vehicle and guess what? You can't get it properly repaired in a timely manner until 2025. So if you're without your vehicle for weeks or even months, oh well, you're SOL. There's basically nothing you can do. That is grossly inequitable, and that is not the case. So again, look, first, COVID doesn't meet the lemon law definition of a natural disaster. And secondly, and even more importantly, it is the car company's fault that they do not have the microchips to do repairs in a timely manner when a new vehicle is defective. Look, as individuals, we all have to suffer the consequences of our actions and our choices. That's just a part of life. That same standard should apply to the car companies.